What is up, Warriors? I am back. Took a little bit off. I'm quite busy with the Reparo campaign. If you haven't checked that out, head over to reparoclothing.com. That is the world's first premium clothing line to protect you from radiation from your cell phone, Wi-Fi, and all the crazy dangers out there. Second of all is, this is the first official Ameer Rosic show. I decided to change up the format. As you guys might know, I made a public announcement not too long ago. I was kind of done with health. I had this epiphany thing not too long ago, and I was like, man, I just can't continue to talk about health. And so format's going to be changed a little bit, kind of moving over to kind of like Joe Rogan-esque, Tim Ferriss-esque, talking about everything, from marketing to mindset to business to achieving mastery, throwing some health here and there, everything. In fact, we're going to even have a UFOologist come by and soon. I have that in the pipework right now. However, our today's special guest is none other than Dave Asprey, one of the world's greatest biohackers. And in honor of Dave's appearance on today's show is because he's just launched his brand new book, which I highly recommend to go get it. We're going to be talking about that during the show. So I decided to kick off the show with a familiar face. So please sit back and relax and enjoy today's amazing podcast with Dave Asprey. So what's new, man? We saw each other a couple of months ago at Mastermind Talks, and since then you've been on a roller coaster ride with a lot of things. So fill us in.
Well, the Bulletproof Diet book is coming out December 2nd with Rodale. So this has been something I've worked on the diet for years, and my background in anti-aging and human performance and all, it's all coming together. So I had no book deal at all. I figured I would self-publish all these things I've been pulling together. And then thanks to my friend JJ Virgin, she sort of introduced me to the right people. And lo and behold, I had a great conversation with Rodale and decided to do a book with him. But I had literally about 6 weeks to complete a book. So I pulled out all the biohacking stops. I stayed up every night for all but 2 hours for 5 nights straight and did the vast bulk of the work using electrical stimulation, lasers, breathing oxygen, drinking, of course, bulletproof coffee even in the middle of the night to wreck my metabolism, cerebral electrical stimulation, special sounds, everything I knew, smart drugs, of course. And I was just in a state of flow for basically a whole week straight. I'd sleep, wake up, and just start writing again. And it was an incredible time. And the book it's phenomenal. So I'm amazed and I'm super stoked. And that's been the big focus. The Bulletproof Conference coming up September 26th. Looks like we should have hundreds of people. I'm not sure the exact count yet because people can still get tickets at bulletproofconference.com. The world's first ever large scale flow induction system is going to be unveiled there. Wow. Where we actually have a 20-foot tall structure with electrodes and all that's designed to help put you into a flow state and to measure yourself what's happening. So we're basically doing things that have never been done before, and doing that right before a book launch has been just personally a challenge, just to manage the amount of things that need doing. So that's been the latest, but it's an awesome time.
I can't wait for the book to come out. I bet it's going to be awesome. So this is a great segue, though, into what we're going to be talking about in today's show, and that is the top 5 biohacks that you think most people out there should be doing. And you mentioned just briefly a little bit some of them you're doing during your crazy 1 week, writing campaign. So let's start with number 1, Dave. What would you say is your number 1 top biohack that everyone should be doing?
The number 1 biohack is relatively simple. You've got to feed yourself right. If you're eating toxins that you don't know about, including naturally occurring ones. It's not like vegetables evolved for us to eat them. Vegetables evolved so they could reproduce. So they have reasons to keep you from eating them. And vegetables are good for you, but if you don't prepare them properly or you eat the wrong ones, especially in excess, they can mess you up. So the idea of eating a high-fat, low-toxin diet with moderate proteins is really important for getting your biology working. When your mitochondria are turned on, which is one of the things we can do nutritionally, then your ability to do all the other biohacks goes up. Whether you want to become more conscious, you want to become smarter, you want to run faster, it doesn't matter. If your cells aren't working right because you didn't eat the right way, all bets are off. So I'd recommend the Bulletproof Diet. Bulletproofdietbook.com is where you can get the free roadmap for the diet. One page you put on your fridge. You don't have to buy the book. If you pre-order the book now, you have my eternal gratitude, and I'll send you a bunch of videos too. But the idea is this info is free. It's already free. It's always been free on the Bulletproof site. So get your diet in order, hack it yourself. And in order to do this, there's software you can use. And it's called Food Detective. It's also free. And this is amazing, but you can actually tell if you're eating a food that makes you weak, something you're sensitive to, just based on changes in your heart rate. So this app, you get your heart rate before you eat and after you eat, and you tell the app what you had. And if your heart rate does something that you wouldn't expect that it should do after you eat, what's happening is your food has triggered a fight or flight response in you. So you're incurring a biological stressor that's lowering your performance, increasing your aging, increasing oxidative stress. And you're getting no benefit from that. So if you had a choice between potatoes and sweet potatoes, and you found out that potatoes, like they do for 20% of people, trigger an autoimmune reaction, maybe you should choose the sweet potatoes because you still got to eat potatoes, right? It's not that big of a difference, but for you, you're avoiding kryptonite. So a big part of the Bulletproof Diet framework, the first biohack I'd recommend is avoid the kryptonite foods like MSG and gluten that don't really have a place in your diet unless you're starving to death and there is no other choice. Then find your own personal kryptonite. There's a list of like suspect foods that are likely to cause problems for large swaths of people. Find what's wrong for you and avoid it. And then focus on getting the right amounts of the very best foods. Things like butter, coconut oil, grass-fed meat, and tons of vegetables, which make up the bulk of what's on your plate, but not the bulk of your calories. You do that, life is going to be different.
Okay, that's awesome. That's number one.
Yep.
What's number two?
Number two, check out heart rate variability training. And there's a couple ways to do this. From a training perspective, I'm an advisor to the Heart Math Institute. And on the Bulletproof side, I carry one of their sensors called an inner balance sensor. It clips on your ear. And with this thing, you can, in about 10 minutes a day for about 6 weeks, that's what I normally do with coaching clients, is I just have them do this basic breathing exercise. But it's guided by your own changes in your heart rate and really the spacing between your heartbeats. So you look at your iPhone and you're like, all right, I'm going to look at this now. And if it turns green, I'm doing the breathing exercise right. And if it turns red, I'm doing it wrong. And it feels like a breathing exercise. What you're really doing is learning to modulate your nervous system to turn off your sympathetic fight or flight response and to turn up your parasympathetic function. After you do it for a couple of days, you learn to feel what it's like when your body goes into fight or flight mode without your permission or your knowledge. And the second skill you learn is how to take it back out of there. So after you gain this skill, life becomes a game of like whack-a-mole, like you'd play at the arcade. You see your stress response pop up at a time when there's no reason for it and you don't want the stress response. You can acknowledge that it happened. You can ask yourself, I wonder what I just did that triggered that, but then you turn it off consciously. So you basically become master of your stress response. This can change your life. Even if you have something extreme like PTSD, it can change your life. But if you're just, like one of my clients, a hedge fund manager, he called me all excited. He's like, Dave, I was on an airplane and I had some time to do this breathing thing. So I did it for an hour. And when I did it, I realized I could get into this really amazing state. And as soon as I thought about work, it would turn red again. So he taught himself to keep it green when he thought about work. And then he said, I went into the office and the market bell opened and it went red and it stayed red all day long. And so he was in a panic mode. He didn't think he was in a panic mode, but his body was in a panic mode as long as the financial markets were open. So he's like, I'm not living that way. And he changed his nervous system response. That's huge. The cost for that sensor is about $99. It's not expensive. And my kids do it. I watched my 7-year-old yesterday. She fell and scraped like all 4 elbows.
So does this work on like old phones? Like how does it work?
It works on the iPhone, and there's a standalone device if you don't have an iPhone. And it literally clips on your ear. I probably have one. I don't have one within reach unless I take off my headphones. But it just clips on your ear, and it shines a bright light through your earlobe, the same way that you get like your fingertip sensor in a hospital. Mm-hmm. And it's just looking at blood flow using an optical sensor. And it turns out if you are going into sympathetic fight or flight response, the space between your heartbeats changes. So a stressed animal has a perfectly even heartbeat. It's like da-dum, 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 da-dum. And an unstressed animal who's parasympathetic dominant, who's not ready to run away or kill you, is da-dum, 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 da-dum. You hear there's a different spacing between them. So both of those examples could be 60 beats a minute, but in one of them, the 60 beats are perfectly spaced. And when we're relaxed, our hearts don't beat every 1 second on the second. They actually move around in a healthy way. And all we do is teach you to feel what it's like when your heart moves around in a healthy way versus when it's repetitive and stressed.
Cool. So that's number 2. What's number 3?
All right, let's see. We're looking at biohacks. Let's talk about exercise. So there's high intensity exercise training. I just finished recording a podcast yesterday with my friend Doug McGuff, who wrote Body by Science.
Oh, that's a good book.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
And in fact, the recommendations for exercise on the Bulletproof site largely come from that book because it's about minimum effective dose. And Doug's a physician who's an exercise geek. But the idea there is that instead of going for a long run, jog, basically, which is something that's been considered healthy for a long time, you might not want to do that. And there's a variety of reasons. One of them is that there's something called the ejection fraction of your heart. And this is the amount of blood that your heart moves in one pump. So a really strong animal could be walking along, a tiger jumps out, and they go, ah! And then when that happens, a huge amount of blood goes into the heart, and the heart slams that blood forward. A stressed animal, or one that's less healthy, will actually go through a different response. And there, the heartbeat gets faster. And so instead of moving a lot of blood, it goes blip, 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 and you just get little droplets of blood, but you get them much faster. You train your heart to have a lower ejection fraction when you only do this chronic endurance cardio. What trains a big ejection fraction is strength training. So there's a great reason to do that. There's also this idea, and this is what Doug and I were just discussing, so it's top of mind for me. But when you do this high intensity training, whether it's a short sprint or just picking up heavy things, it helps to turn down inflammatory cytokines in the body. So there's overall an anti-inflammation effect, which is remarkable when you look at what happens there. So once a week, you lift really heavy things, and it changes a signaling molecule in the body so that you actually downregulate inflammation everywhere. That's a huge thing.
Do you have any favorite high intensity exercises or types of protocols?
I am a fan of good old-fashioned Body by Science. It's 5 core body weight exercises. We're talking a bench press, pull down, very basic stuff like that. For keeping your heart healthy, though, it's a 400-meter sprint followed by a very brief rest, followed by another 400-meter sprint. I also, in my own practice, and this is something that isn't easily accessible to a lot of people, but I use the electrical stimulation in order to get a lot more
I saw
intensity.
that when you brought it down. That thing's crazy.
Oh yeah, I was talking to people at a bar.
Yeah, that was insane.
At Jason's event at Mastermind Talks. Did you get a chance to try it? I don't remember. Did we slap any electrodes on you?
Yeah, I had on my bicep you put it.
That's right. We did your biceps. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like 20 people doing it then, and it's kind of amazing. But I've been able to just get masses of muscle contractions, which is what you want. They're like very, very strong contractions, stronger than I think I could easily turn on with my brain that way. But you don't have to do that kind of stuff. What this means though is if you go to the gym and you're like, especially for women, oh, I don't want to get big, so I'm going to pick up the 2-pound pink weight and I'm going to flop it around for a little while. I'm like, I'm sorry, you don't get the hormonal response to exercise you want. And women don't really have much testosterone. You're not going to get big and bulky that way, but you will get lean and you'll turn down that inflammation. And what causes muffin top? It's actually not fat, it's inflammation. So if it comes and goes, that's inflammation. If it's there all the time, it's either inflammation or maybe it's fat. And if it's fat, you're going to see fat elsewhere as well.
I see you have some kettlebells in the back. What's your take on those?
I'm a huge fan of kettlebells. I typically use mine. Now, see, we're getting into all the crazy stuff. But I use mine on my whole body vibration plate. So if you, let's see, if you look behind me, let me just make sure I'm not looking at myself right now.
Yeah, we see that.
Yeah, but look at this thing back there.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a yoga mat on top of it because I was doing plank pose on it.
Cool.
But that thing right back there is the bulletproof vibe. And that vibrates up and down 30 times a second. So what I'll do is I'll put a kettlebell in each hand and hold them like this. And then 30 times a second, my body's doing that.
Mm,
And whole body vibration by itself increases muscle density. But the real reason that you want to do it is to get this lymphatic circulation, to move your body's detox things that you don't have a circulation system. You must move for it. Today, I'm going to be on Skype pretty much all day. I'm not going to go for a walk in the middle of the day because it's too packed.
mhm.
But do I have 5 minutes to stand on that? Yeah, I do. You just feel energized from it. But if I do that holding a kettlebell, even just in a bicep position, what happens here is you get this little bit of vibration, but the body perceives that 30 times a second you were picking up, a 40-pound kettlebell or whatever it is. And so the neurological inputs from that are much higher on the joints and on the nerves. So the nerves themselves change, which is really, really important.
That's cool. Okay, moving along. What would you say is number four?
Number four, and I'm not sure that I've organized these particularly well, but let's talk about some of the other things that you can do with your brain. And smart drugs are just something that we should all be considering. Or better yet, talk about nootropics.
Mm,
Nootropics can be pharmaceutical smart drugs that make you smarter, but nootropics also encompasses the idea of smart nutrients and herbs that affect your cognitive function. There are thousands of studies looking at anti-aging, anti-cognitive aging, and performance-enhancing benefits of things you can do. And there's a couple different systems in the brain that you can work with. One of the ones that roughly two-thirds of people benefit from is the acetylcholine part of the brain. This can increase memory, increase your ability to pay attention, increase your energy levels. So I use a product and I make it. It's called Choline Force. And Choline Force, it's choline, Choline, is the main precursor to acetylcholine, which is the stimulating neurotransmitter. But if you have restless leg syndrome, you get cramps, and you get jaw tension, you may be one of the third of people who have too much of it, and it's the wrong supplement for you. So I find that the typical person who really just wants to have that amazing energy all day will take something called Siltep, which we carry. It's an extract of artichoke and an Indian herb. When you combine those two, it potentiates the cells in your brain so they work better. So you get an energy boost from that. You get acetylcholine from Choline Force if you need that. And then you're thinking, wow, I'm feeling very, very different than I did before. It's also possible to use another one of the major neurotransmitters in your brain called GABA. GABA is a calming neurotransmitter, and usually you take GABA before bed to go to sleep. But I've worked with something called phenyl GABA and made something called GABA Wave. And I don't think I quite handed some out at that conference. It wasn't quite on the market when we last hung out. But this is an ampule. You drink a little thing of it, and you just have this amazing, just calm focus all day long, and it amplifies your sleep at the end of the day. So one dose in the morning, focus all day, sleep all night. I use it especially if I'm traveling, but I do one of those about every other day, and it's really a big difference. So I'd call that number four. Look at what these things are that can enhance your mental function. And if you can't feel it, find one that works, because you should be able to feel these things. They should be very noticeable. And if they're not, take it for a week and then stop taking it. And then you'll notice when it's gone. Most of the time, it feels so natural when your brain is working all the way that it's hard to notice. But when your brain goes back to not working the way it used to, like I don't grasp for words. That's not how my brain works anymore. But for me, the normal state was always, what was I going to say? There's a word. I'll remember the word in a little while. And I opened the fridge door. What was I going to get? Those things don't happen. And if they do happen, for me, it's a sign that I did something in my environment or something I didn't get enough sleep or whatever it is. But there's a reason, because the normal natural state for all of us is that your brain will bring it all day long without dropping stuff. And if you're dropping stuff, it's because you haven't optimized all the way.
Now, what's your take on like stacks? You mentioned certain nootropics over here. Now, what happens if I want to combine them all together?
Well, I write about that a lot on the Bulletproof site. So it turns out acetylcholine and those stacks, they've been around for like 20 years. And I've been taking them for about that long. So there are tons of generic choline stacks out there. They all do the same thing. All of them have slightly different ingredients. Some are more expensive than others. You can basically go out to Whole Foods and you'll find some stuff that works. I have a tried and true, actually a very high end formula that I use, but you don't have to buy mine. It's even just taking something as simple as a basic choline donor, or even just eating more raw egg yolks, putting them in your smoothie can improve the acetylcholine function. So this is something that stacks very nicely with something like a CILTEP because they're using different mechanisms of action. And those things also stack just fine with GABA wave. Where you actually can get even more benefit is if you add my all-time favorite smart drug, and one that I actually don't sell, is called aniracetam. And the whole racetam family is one of the oldest and best studied forms of smart drugs. But it is, in the US, aniracetam is considered a nutritional supplement. In most of the world, it's a pharmaceutical. So you can order it online. It's ANIRACETAM. And aniracetam is amazing because it increases oxygen in the brain without changing blood flow. And then it increases your memory I/O. And if you're a computer geek like I am, your input output is the amount of bandwidth or the amount of space you have to move things in and out of your memory. So if your job involves your brain or even art, getting something that's in here out here and vice versa is a critical skill. And it also helps to lower stress. So all of a sudden you're like, wow, I feel really good. I took aniracetam. It's subtle, but things flow better than they did before. So that's really, really worth looking at. And
How would
aniracetam
you
stacks.
take aniracetam? Like, how would you stack it, dosages? Like, how do you personally take it?
Oh, I take 800 to 1600 milligrams of aniracetam in the morning. And sometimes I'll take 800 aniracetam and another 100 of phenylpiracetam, which gives you more body energy. So I basically take a mix of different racetams, and you don't have to do that
Now,
by a
does
long
that
shot.
pass a blood-brain barrier? Do you have to take it with, for example, choline?
With aniracetam, it absolutely crosses the blood-brain barrier. And for some people, you want to take it with choline because it can increase the amount of choline that you use. And at that point, stacking choline force with aniracetam or piracetam would make great sense. Except a third of people, in fact, people like me now, have excessive acetylcholine in the brain. And that may be genetic, it may be lifestyle. But whatever it is, when I get too much choline, I get a headache and I get jaw tension, and it's not a good thing. My cholinergic systems are very strong in my brain. So they didn't used to be, but they are now largely because of diet and nutrition and maybe brain training. So when you get that just right, for me, aniracetam without choline actually makes me better. For you, it may be aniracetam with choline. So this is an example where for two-thirds of people, stacking those is the right thing. For one-third of people, just aniracetam without choline force or any other choline stack is going to be the right move.
Is there any other types of nootropics you like beside? Like, I know the racetam family is big. You just mentioned aniracetam. Is there any, like, for example, maybe piracetam?
Piracetam is the oldest and best studied of the racetams, and I took it for so long. There are stronger racetams, and in fact, my all-time favorite after aniracetam is very, like, it just makes your brain work better. Phenylpiracetam provides whole body energy and some cognitive function. So if you just wanted to like feel really good, I mean, bulletproof coffee plus a phenylpiracetam, and you're like, all right, I'm just going to go out there and do whatever I want to do. Like it's really a positive thing. And if you add one aniracetam into the mix, you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I like brain, body, this is
So
great.
let's talk about this because I know a lot of optimal health warriors out there. They do a lot of speaking gigs or entrepreneurs are going around to do a lot of presentations, talks around. So what would be your favorite type of stack or mixture for people who have to do public speaking a lot?
So I don't exist to pitch stuff. I'm gonna I just talk about what works, and you can take it or leave it. I'll talk about JJ Virgin. You know JJ, right?
Hmm.
So JJ's a friend, and there's a supplement that actually we're putting the pre-order page online today, and we did not plan this. In fact, I didn't know that my people were putting it online today, but they told me last night. And it's the supplement that's I'm most excited about in the entire history of me doing supplements. It's called Unfair Advantage. And it's a mitochondrial optimizer. And what it does is it gives you this kind of huge surge very quickly of mitochondrial activity, and your prefrontal cortex, which is what you need when you're speaking, you want that turned on. So you take the stuff, and 5 minutes later you feel warmth starting in the very center of your forehead, and it spreads, and then you're like, oh my god, my brain is on all the way. And then 5 minutes later it goes to the rest of your body, and then you're like, I could pick up that refrigerator. So I gave JJ like this little sample. It came in a very illicit looking ampule like this, right? And she comes back to me 20 minutes later and says, you have to give me more. And I said, JJ, I only made 100 of these. Like I'm giving them out to people like very early beta testing. And she said, no, I'm giving a speech to 20,000 people in 2 days. And I want this in my body when I do that. It really, like, there's a difference. So for me, before I go on stage, I always do heart rate variability. I don't have to have my device with me. Once you learn the technique from the device, you can turn off your sympathetic, turn on your parasympathetic, lowers your anxiety response. Instead of going out with that moment of panic, you just go out there, you're already ready to flow. The audience can feel that you're there and that you're present and that you're not afraid and that you're there to give and to help and to support rather than, to like just to look good or whatever. So I always do that. I consider that part of my performance stack, even though it's a behavior, not a drug, right? For the average person, if you know you respond well to choline force, it's going to be good for you. If it makes you jittery, you don't need choline force and you shouldn't take it. So you want to experiment. Don't take this before your first big speech because it could just give you too much energy. You talk too fast. See how you respond to it. But for most people, it's choline force, not a high dose of it, just the minimum, even one pill. Some people want two, it depends. Then Siltep, which is something else we carry on the site. That's the artichoke stuff. And that can be really nice. On top of that, I would layer in some Unfair Advantage. And that stuff lasts for between 6 and 8 hours in the body. It recycles. It's a very basic cellular energy thing, and it's not a drug or even an herbal thing. It's just a new form of a molecule called PQQ, and this form has never been on the market before.
Okay,
it's not PQQ.
Oh, it's not PQQ.
It's active PQQ.
Okay.
All the PQQ you can buy is disodium salt. It precipitates out. I've taken a handful of PQQ and I don't feel anything. You take one ampule of this and within 5 minutes, you're like, these are not the same substance. And it has to do with making colloids for the delivery system, as well as a different biological form of PQQ. Then we synthesize it instead of buying it from a giant chemical manufacturer, because the stuff you can get all over the place doesn't have the same bioavailability at all. And it's like night and day. I've been on regular dose PQQ for 3 years, 30 milligrams a day, and I can't feel a thing. And I take one dose of Unfair Advantage, and you're like, this is how the body's supposed to feel. Like not even the same substance. So they're just different. And I'll send you a box, by the way. Just
cool.
All you have to do is try it, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I get it. So you do that, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, my cellular stuff is working, my neurotransmitters are working, and I've potentiated the long-term chemical activity of the cells. You do that, and then unquestionably for me, I will not go on stage without having had a bulletproof coffee sometime in the previous 4 hours. And the reason for that is I want beta oxidation in my cells. I want the formation of ketones that happens from brain octane oil. Do I sound like kind of a freak here, Ameer? I hope so, because I am a freak when I go on stage, and that's the point. I want to be at the very height of my game.
Yeah.
So there's aniracetam, there's bulletproof coffee, there's for me, I don't use choline force on a regular basis, maybe once every couple of weeks, because I already have too much choline. And I use aniracetam actually to lower my choline. And I'll take Siltep, and I'll take Unfair Advantage. And potentially, especially if I'm overseas or I'm jet lagged, I'll take a GABA wave. And at that point, it's like I feel so good and I'm so on that I can think about what the audience is doing. I can think about what I'm going to say next. I can think about what's on my slide, and I can talk without stuttering, without weird pauses, without all of those things that get in the way of a really good stage performance. So I just feel like my self-awareness is where it should be. But I'm not ampy, because that's the worst thing you could be, is on stage and like, okay, let me just tell you what I'm going to do. Like, you don't want to do that. So it's an art, and it's an art of being fully present and then being willing and able to bring it and then give whatever it is you have to give to the audience. And for me, my ability goes up dramatically when I follow that kind of a protocol. And I really do that every time I go on stage. This morning, I had bulletproof coffee. You can see my espresso
Yeah,
machine
there
right
it
back
is. Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I had that. In fact, I put some extra vanilla in there because it gives me a little extra kind of twinkle in how I feel. And on top of that, I had aniracetam, and it totally helps. I didn't do choline force, and I did do unfair advantage. I took a big bunch of it before I went to sleep last night because it helps my sleep as well.
Awesome. So that's number 4. That's super in depth. I know people are gonna love this. I think your page is gonna crash when this goes live.
Well, I mean,
Back order. I want the unfair advantage.
yeah, well, we're pre-ordering that stuff now because I don't know how much to make, but I've never felt anything like it. It's my most exciting
Well,
supplement
what
in
I'll tell you what excites me though. Like when we're talking about PQQ, we're talking about the redox potential here with the electron transport chain. So it's quite fascinating that the ability to increase that fast. It's not just a slow increase; you feel it instantaneous. That your mitochondria is upregulating, your electron
Right.
transport chain is upregulating. At the end of the day, you're pumping out more ATP.
Do you actually take PQQ now?
No.
So I mean, I took it on faith. I've read all the studies, and I'm like, why can't I feel this stuff? I really should be able to feel it. And when in the bulletproof biohacking labs, we synthesized the basically it's called active PQQ. It's a new ingredient basically, but what we did is we went through, synthesized that, and then made super tiny molecules packaged with PQQ. And the first time I took it, I'm like, did that just happen? Like, is it a fluke? Because it was so amazing. And I thought, well, I'm PQQ, it's 6 and 1/2 dozen of the other, but different animal. So yeah, that was super specific. But hacking your mitochondria by getting the ketones and getting that PQQ in, the cool thing is PQQ recycles 10,000 times, and it's amplified by glutathione, which is kind of funny. Glutathione is one of my other supplements that tastes like kind of not so nice. But you take a syringe and you take some of it, but there's ways to get these substances that are incredibly precious at the cellular level.
Yeah.
They just get digested when you take them normally, or they get inactivated by stomach acid. But when you get them into the right form, they just penetrate, and all of a sudden you're like, I didn't know my body had that in it. And this is just your mitochondria, these basic energy plants that are tied directly to aging. If your mitochondria don't work very well, you get old. Your mitochondria work really well, you stay younger. Like it's so important. And for me as a former 300-pound guy with really bad health, like this matters greatly, but I just want to feel good all the time.
We all
So
do.
speaking of that, let's go to the next thing because we had a great segue about sleep. Because I talked about GABA wave and how it helps me sleep, especially for jet lag. Because if you're not sleeping, whether it's because you're jet lagged because you're speaking somewhere, or just because you're stressed, when a typical like CEO kind of client and I start working together, one of the first questions is, "How's your sleep?" And there's generally a couple big problems. One is I don't go to sleep efficiently, and the other is I don't stay asleep. A third problem that people have that they're not aware of so much is I go to sleep, but I don't get good sleep. And that one's harder to notice without a sensor or something, but it can be noticeable. So what you do when you are kind of sitting there saying, all right, I want to go to sleep, but I'm thinking about whether I'm going to give a good speech tomorrow. And I'm thinking about, that person was mean to me today. And, do I have enough money to make the payments or whatever it is that keeps you up at night? I have no idea what it is. But whatever that is, that voice in your head, you should own that voice in your head. And I use very advanced neurofeedback as the most masterful biohack of all for me to control that voice in my head. It's called the 40 Years of Zen program, and I write about other forms of neurofeedback.
We had a podcast, I think, last year about this too, so that everyone can check out that old one. Put it in the show notes.
There you go. That's a perfect link. So that kind of stuff lets you own that voice in your head. But going back to just like, what do you do? Well, that heart rate variability training stuff, you can do Stress Detective, which uses a chest strap. You can monitor your heart rate variability all night long. That's an iPhone app. Or you can use the inner balance sensor for 10 minutes before you go to sleep. So that's kind of my recommendation for a client who says, I don't go to sleep well. I'm like, do heart rate variability training. Do that, and you'll be like, whoa, I feel different. there's another hack, and I was supposed to have it here. It's on my bed. the, the bulletproof sleep induction mat.
Mm.
Again, I'm mentioning stuff I make. I make stuff that I want to use, and that's just how I roll. This is a. I don't know, should I grab it? Do you think
No,
people
I did
want
a
to see
whole
it?
review. I did a whole review
Yeah.
about it. I have
Okay.
a big
People
article. I'll
have
put it in
already.
the show notes. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
People have seen it in your content, and this is a spiky piece of cloth that unrolls on your bed, and it pushes on your back. You lay on it. It activates these acupressure points, and that will knock you out because your body goes, "Oh my God, something's cutting me apart." It's so bad, and you just like shut up, body, and you just lay there. And it's if you ever like held a puppy, it struggles and then it just gives up and goes, and it's that melting, you get this wave of endorphins, and it just gets deep sleep all night long. So those are two hacks. The third hack is one that I don't talk about as much, and it's something that people who are watching this might really like, and it's called an ujjayi breath. And you might want to go to a yoga teacher to learn this, or maybe an art of living course. But it's a breath that goes in through the nose, and it sounds like a seashell when you hold it up here, like a wave. And so you close your mouth and you go, almost like you're gonna like make a snoring, like a snorting sound, right on the edge of snorting. And it's hard to know if you're doing it right until someone who knows it hears you do it and go, "Oh yeah, you did it right." So an ujjayi breath, usually three of those, all in a row, long, slow, deep inhalations, using that part of your breathing apparatus, it's going to knock you out. It's very calming. So those are ways to go to sleep. To stay asleep, I read about sleep hacks, and I don't think we can cover all of those in the time that we've got here. But some of the basic sleep hacks are for one group of people, the minimum effective dose of raw honey that keeps you asleep all night can be amazing. And you may consider taking that with like brain octane oil so you continue having beta oxidation. If you wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, there can be a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons can be that you ran out of energy. And at night, we have this cool thing called the glymphatic system, which is different than the lymphatic system. So lymph is this fluid that helps to carry waste from our cells out of the body, and lymph is pumped by muscle activity. So when you move your muscles, you're moving lymph, and eventually it drains, and you get it out of the body the way you get rid of most waste, which is by pooping. So that's part of it. But your brain, we just figured out, actually drains a lot of its fluid at night and replaces it with new fluid. And this is a mitochondrial activity, which means that when your mitochondria are working, can you say upgraded advantage helps sleep? But when your mitochondria are working fully, the pumping mechanisms are more effective. And this is some of the research that I did for the Bulletproof Diet book, was like looking into the glymphatic system, especially because it turns out if you're getting ketones in your body, which you can get from brain octane oil, or even from glucose. And you would use raw honey before bed because raw honey can actually it increases glycogen in your liver about 22% better than other forms of sugar. So I'm not a fan of fructose at all. I would say under 25 grams a day and as low as you can get it most days. But a little bit of the stuff before bed can prop up your glucose and stabilize it for a good number of hours. And that glucose tends to be used by the brain rather than the muscles. So you get a noticeable benefit, and some people it doesn't help at all. So some combination of brain octane or collagen, and collagen has a whole different set of things to keep you asleep. And it's hard to tell what's right for you. You've got to be a sleep hacker. And part of the sleep hack there is use some sort of a sleep sensor. You can get something that runs on an Android device or an iPhone. There's a variety of things out there. I use an app called Sleep Cycle. And like when I look at my sleep on Sleep Cycle, I think I've got 500 and something days of data on here. And I use an embedded sensor too, but it looks like I'm getting 569 nights. My average time in bed is 5 hours and 58 minutes across, going on almost 2 years. This app is, $1 or two. It's called Sleep Cycle. But what I like about it is, in addition to telling me whether I tossed and turned or I didn't, it looks for when I'm near the top of a sleep cycle. So I wake up feeling refreshed instead of waking up when I was like at the very bottom in deep sleep and then you're groggy
It
and
goes through the
cranky.
different stages of 1 to 5 and tells you where you
Yeah.
are. Okay.
Yeah. And so something like that, your alarm clock should be doing this for you. And if you're not using an alarm clock like that, you're missing out. Like it's cheaper than the alarm clock by your bed. If you put your phone in airplane mode, it's not going to cook you with EMFs. And like it really changes how you wake up. I just love having a good quality alarm like that.
That's awesome. Well, that's amazing. Those are the top 5 biohacks that everyone should be doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, Dave, I always ask my guests a special question. If you had to summarize, what would be your top 3 optimal health books that you have read or you're going to read? It can be about business, mindset, health. It doesn't matter.
Top three health books or just top three books in
Top 3
general?
books have transformed your life.
Hmm. Napoleon Hill is classic reading, right? And it's hard to go wrong with this. It's probably the original self-help. I kind of hesitate calling it self-help because that's not what it's about. Napoleon Hill is this amazing guy who a long time ago was hired by Andrew Carnegie, a very wealthy guy, to find out like what makes people kick ass. What makes all these rich people rich, what makes all these powerful people powerful, boil it down. And I was just blown away. I read this when I was 16. In fact, one of his recommendations is that you write down on a sheet of paper like this your big goal, and you put it up, and you just look at it every morning in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth or whatever. So I did that, and I wrote that I wanted to make $1 million by the time I was 23. And I didn't come from a family with money and stuff like that. We weren't dirt poor, but not well off, and you call it middle class. So for me, this was just like a big goal. And when I was 26, I made $6 million. Didn't hit it when I was 23, but I was pretty darn close. Like I was willing to accept that. I didn't actually write in my goal that I would keep the money because the company I worked for went bankrupt when I
Mm.
was 28, and I sort of lost my $6 million. But hey, still, it was an amazing time, and it helps that the dot-com boom happened. But the point there is the very basic techniques that he uses are spiritual. They're still groundbreaking today, and most people don't either have the courage or willpower to take advantage of them. So I would say read his book and try even the weirdest stuff in there. He writes about something that I've talked very publicly and widely about. The transforming your sexual energy, which is at the core of being a human, into the ability to change the world. And he
Mm.
has a practice for that. And he talks about building a mastermind. We all talk about masterminds, but he says build one in your mind. Invite Abraham Lincoln, invite Albert Einstein, and just imagine you're meeting with these guys to work on problem solving. And something weird happens when you do that. But his techniques are solid. So that book is on my list. Another one is Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power. And he's got a new book called Mastery that's also really good. But the reason 48 Laws of Power works is if you don't understand how slimy people are trying to manipulate you, you are going to be walking around blind. And when I was around 26, at this time, my career was going crazy. And I was actually never allowed to speak, but I was the only guy in my decade allowed to attend board meetings for a company with a $36 billion market cap. So I was allowed to sit in the back of the room and just observe what happened in these meetings. And I attended executive staff with all these people 20 years older than me who had these amazing career accomplishments. And I'm this like young punk kid who understands a lot about how the internet works. And I thought they were all batshit crazy, Amir, because their behaviors didn't make any sense to me. And I come from engineering. I used to have like the symptoms of Asperger's syndrome. Like I was very, very logical and sort of just avoided paying attention to my emotions because they were too scary. Didn't know that was why I was doing it. But so I'm sitting in this boardroom going, how is this even possible that all these people who seem so accomplished are so dumb? When I read 48 Laws of Power, I couldn't put it down because it was a set of anecdotes about how people act. And it was told in stories in a way that I guess I just absorbed it well. And the next week, when I sat down at it was a board meeting or executive staff, I was like, oh my God, these people are using these rules so elegantly that it's like watching martial artists. And they weren't like actively trying to screw each other, but they were all positioning for power, making sure they got their needs met, working for the good of the overall company, but protecting their people and their turf. And I was blown away because there was a whole invisible world that had never been there for me until I read Robert Greene's book, 48 Laws of Power. The next book that I would recommend is actually Gary Taub's book, and not his Why We Get Fat book, but which is more like, how to eat. It was Good Calories, Bad Calories. It's 500 pages. There's not a wasted word. The book is a work of art because there's not a wasted word. And if you want to understand why you've been told to do all sorts of stupid stuff, not just nutritionally, but why the world ends up with suboptimal solutions. This is a perfect story of the politics and the science behind why you were told to eat bad quality fats and not very much of them and tons of sugar. And it's not just the science, and there's lots of science out there. I cover that book. It's going back 40 years now, was writing about some of that stuff. But if you're like, okay, there's clearly different camps. There's vegetarian belief systems, there's low fat, all those things. Why did the government pick one that didn't work very well and was unstudied and stick with it for nearly 40 something years?
Yeah.
The reasons are in this book. And if you don't understand that our society and humans work at that level and the systemic behaviors that happen without any intent, then you're flying blind. So all of these books kind of open my eyes in different ways, and I think they're very valuable books.
That's amazing. Dave, where can people find more information about you?
Go to bulletproofexec.com. That's kind of the clearinghouse for what's happening with Bulletproof. I put out the Bulletproof Radio podcast, #1 ranked in health quite often, and really, I think we're about number 45 in all podcasts most of the time. It's also becoming a nationally syndicated radio show. On top of that, Bulletproof Exec on Twitter. And soon enough in Los Angeles, we'll be opening the first Bulletproof coffee shop.
Oh, awesome.
Last request, Ameer. We hit #1 on Amazon for diet books, even though the Bulletproof Diet book comes out December 2nd. So it's already been #1 in its category on Amazon and number 15 of all books on Amazon. I'm amazed and grateful. If you're thinking about getting the Bulletproof Diet book, please pre-order it on Amazon now. And that really helps my publisher know how many copies to publish. And if you do it and go to bulletproofdietbook.com, I'll send a whole bunch of free videos to you. I'm not going to try and upsell you, cross-sell you, side-sell you, and give you the $2,000 video on so-and-so. I just want people to get the knowledge, and I'd be so grateful.
Dave Asprey, he was my first guest for the Ameer Rosic show. Decided to just keep it a little bit health for now. Next week's show, we're going to have a real great guest. We're going to be talking about ebook publishing. It's a good friend of mine, so stay tuned for that. The only thing I'm asking from you guys is, if you haven't already, please head over to iTunes and leave a review. The more reviews we have, well, the more people we can help in the world. Have an amazing day. Talk to you soon. Cheers.